Urgent. On April 25th, a 31-year-old named Cole Allen breached the security perimeter of the Washington Hilton. Calling himself a friendly federal assassin, he opened fire with a shotgun at a Secret Service checkpoint, wounding an officer just as the White House Correspondents' Dinner was beginning inside. 2 days later, a stationary commuter train in Benghazi was struck from behind by a long-distance express. A single stalled taxi on the tracks had forced the first train to stop. The resulting collision killed 15 people and left 84 injured. These physical security failures coincided with an informational rupture at the Department of Justice, where millions of redacted files were being unsealed, just as a missile exchange over the Strait of Hormuz effectively closed the world's most critical oil corridor. Fortified networks are only as stable as their most mundane intersections. When the chain of compliance breaks, at a security gate or a level crossing, the multi-trillion-dollar system it protects begins to cascade. A cartel is a closed system. It operates on 3 strict rules: hoard the leverage, engineer artificial scarcity, and demand total compliance. This visualization compares OPEC's total capacity to its actual production. 12 allied nations sit on millions of barrels of extractable crude, but they intentionally cap their daily output to maintain an artificial shortage that keeps global prices high. This same logic applied to the social circle of Jeffrey Epstein. For decades, his network functioned as a social cartel, where titans of technology and politics traded moral compromise for absolute, untouchable access to an elite circle. Both of these systems rely on the perception of total invulnerability. They remain stable only as long as every member believes that staying in the group is safer than leaving it. But mathematical models built on pure compliance contain a fatal flaw. The moment external pressures squeeze the network, the shared loyalty evaporates, and the system is exposed to the greed of its own members. In the energy markets, that pressure arrived with the war in Iran. With the Strait of Hormuz blocked, the global oil supply plummeted, sending the international benchmark, Brent crude, surging above $111 a barrel. This isolates the production dilemma for the United Arab Emirates. The UAE has the infrastructure to pump 5 million barrels a day. To maintain the cartel's scarcity, OPEC rules force them to cap output at 3.4 million, leaving a 1.6 million barrel gap in daily revenue. State-run ADNOC chose to abandon the 60-year alliance. On April 28th, the UAE announced its exit from OPEC to execute a long-planned strategy, aggressively monetize its reserves before the global energy transition renders them less valuable. OPEC's third-largest producer didn't fall to a foreign adversary. The cartel fractured from within, because, under the pressure of war and shifting demand, the math of defection became irresistible. The social cartel faced its own external pressure when the Epstein Transparency Act forced the Department of Justice to unseal millions of investigative records. These files raised a glaring question. If Jeffrey Epstein's 2008 conviction was public knowledge, why did his network of billionaires continue to grow and thrive for a full decade afterward? The documents show the cartel protecting its own. The unsealed logs document tech leaders like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk engaging with Epstein well into the 2010s, attending dinners and inquiring about visits to his private island years after he was a registered sex offender. The fallout reached the highest levels of political life. Melania Trump faced defensive press conferences and documentary projects aimed at distancing her modeling career from the newly unsealed timeline of the Epstein circle. Forced transparency broke the social compact. As the files went public, the elite immediately began to scramble, defecting against one another to salvage their individual reputations. This rapid adaptation is a documented biological rule. In April 2026, Nature published a study on pervasive directional selection. It found that when an environment turns hostile, populations don't change at random. They undergo aggressive, permanent shifts in a specific direction to survive. This Manhattan plot visualizes those aggressive shifts. These blue spikes track hundreds of genetic variants that mutated rapidly as human populations faced extreme selective pressures since the end of the Ice Age. This biological reality explains the geopolitical landscape of 2026. The UAE's defection is a permanent directional mutation, a move to secure its own economic survival as the era of oil cartels reaches its limit. The radicalization of shooters like Cole Allen follows this same pattern. His manifesto, filled with grievances over naval strikes and religious justifications, represents a directional shift in domestic politics. In an environment that feels increasingly hostile, individuals and state actors alike move toward extreme, self-preserving behaviors. The fixed production quotas and social compacts that once unified these networks have shattered. These systems weren't toppled by an outside force. They dissolved when the math of collective loyalty was overtaken by the instinct for individual survival. As these legacy power structures splinter, the vacancy at the center of global influence is widening. The focus is shifting from who can save the old systems to who is currently positioning themselves to inherit the rubble.